Okay, so we're going to get to there's the other microphone. Step 5, which is the last step of the evacuation plan. And so this is the part where you're really going to look at the, what are going to be the triggers for your plan and the different stages of your plan. And we have, that's going to be, nobody can read this, but you will see this in the printout that you have. And so basically what we have put in here are some sample actions that you might take. And we have aligned them with the Australian alert system. And so this is just a sample, again, of kind of what you might do for your facility or for your home. And, like we mentioned before, you're going to have the different categories for your animals, right? And so if we're looking at this as a flood, perhaps when, if you live in an area that floods, seasonally, maybe at the beginning of the flood season, you're going to update your animal list. Maybe you might even make kennel cards for all of the animals that you have, but you might do some of these administrative things or check to make sure all your carriers, you have enough carriers for everything. And then, only when it reaches to the next stage of like, okay, now the weather forecasters are saying that this is going to happen. Maybe then you start taking some different steps. Maybe that's when you, reach out to all of your emergency support network members and alert them that, the flood is coming and you have them listed in your plan. You had asked Susie to take your 2 pelicans, Sarah, and you want to call Sarah and say, do you still have space, for my pelicans? And to make sure you can confirm that. So anyways, this is just an example, and we want you to, on your own time, go through and take a look at these and think through for your own facility or your home, how you might organize yourself and how you might make those make it very clear. So that way, when you hit a certain point, you know exactly what you need to do, but keep yourself organized during a disaster. And so one of the things Rob and I were talking about this morning is, when do you find out about some of these alerts or when it reaches certain stages? And so I understand that there is obviously public information that would be shared in the event of a disaster. But one of the benefits of having this plan and talking to your local emergency officials is they might even give you a call and give you a heads up and say, oh, you shared your plan with me. I know you have a very detailed section. It's going to be critical for you to move certain animals. I want to give you a heads up that we anticipate the fire is not going to be contained and it's going to jump this road. But, having those conversations and showing that level of professionalism sometimes invites you to those conversations that you might not otherwise be aware of. But really opening up that emergency network, getting that communication going will really help in the event of a disaster.
And again, just reiterating that these will be different depending on the disaster. So ideally in your action plan, you would separate these out for the different disasters because they may have different triggers depending on what that disaster is.
Okay, so then, what's next? And so once you have a draft of your plan, you're going to want to walk through it to identify like what gaps you may have, such as, we don't have enough carriers, so we need to get more carriers. We also want you to practice, probably not with the real animals, unless you really want a stressful event. But you would maybe get some stuffed animals or, whatever you may have, but kind of go through the steps and do like a tabletop activity where, you call Sarah, Sarah comes and collects them, and do a little bit of a simulation. So that way you can really get a feel for what it's going to be like and also identify any issues or places where you might need to change some of the steps that you have. And of course, the share section, just want to push that one out again. If you're going to write a plan, make sure you share it, especially with the people that are part of it. Again, if you are in an isolated area, I would really recommend reaching out to your neighbors or to your local officials and sharing the plan with them so that they know, what's next door to them, even if next door is 10 minutes down the road. But just trying to really do the best you can do. And I think that was mentioned that, you can plan and plan and plan and things will go a little bit awry, but, we know it's not going to be perfect. We know that there'll always be surprises, something will go wrong and that's why we're human. But we're going to learn from that and try to do better for the next one.
And just to add to the share, people that you have on your emergency support network, make sure they know that they're on your network. It's no use calling them at the last minute to say, can you help me, if they have no idea what they're about to get into.
And one last plug for this is also, if you know somebody else who has animals who's not in this room today or online, please share this information with them. Like we said, that the template is available on our website. We're certainly more than willing to talk to anybody about creating a plan. So please share this information. Okay, so a little bit of recap. So why do we plan for an evacuation? I think we covered this pretty well. It really reduces panic. We all know that emergencies are really a taxing time, and we want to, do the best for the animals that we have in our care. It really increases that professionalism and opens up those relationships with authorities or veterinarians or other fellow carers or facilities. We do not want to become a victim. Can't stress this point enough. Unfortunately, I think every year we hear of animal owners or animal carers or animal guardians, whether it's a snake or a horse or a wombat, whatever it may be, but people will not leave their animals, and we really want people to leave when danger comes. Okay, so what's next? So hopefully you have like a little bit of a beginning of a draft on your table, and that you've kind of been thinking through some of these bits. We'd really like you to, when you get home, finish it, or go online if that's more comfortable for you, to do a Word document plan, and have that plan and share it with somebody. That would be, I would be so happy if Rob sent out a poll and we heard how many people created the plan and shared it with somebody else. That's really what this is all about, is supporting everyone in this room to continue to provide the care for the animals they have. So for this next section, we talked really about that individual level. And the world of disaster response and emergencies and wildlife is really large. One of the other pieces we always think about is, if you can take care of the animals at your house and get them to a safe place, maybe you can then perform another role during the disaster. You can help out your community. And so this next section that we want to look at is really how you, as a carer or a veterinarian or working for a facility, might help out in a more community-wide event, not just thinking of the isolated individual home or facility. And one of the pieces that we have really thought a lot about is catastrophic planning, because we've been seeing a lot of disasters that are reaching a magnitude, affecting an area that is larger than was ever originally thought could even happen. And so we want to really think about how we as a community can help out in a large scale event. So this next section, we're going to kind of take it up a level. And so, Rob and I, again, were talking this morning, and he just started with IFAW in end of November. And so, Rob, how many disasters have there been since you started at IFAW that we've worked on?
I started to table a list. This is not exhaustive, but just what came to mind when I was writing it. So in the last 8 months since I've been with IFAW, we've helped with widespread flooding, Victoria, New South Wales, the Murray River as well, the flooding there that tracked into the Northern Territory as well. Kimberley flooding that we experienced here in the northern regions here. And then further south, Denmark fires, extreme heat that we heard about with Dr. Sean yesterday. Turkey, Syria earthquakes, which I'm sure we'll hear very shortly with HSI as well. New Zealand cyclone, Vanuatu cyclones, 2 in 1 week. Mexico volcano eruption, which almost took out 2 million people and their animals in Mexico City. Guam, Typhoon Haiti floods, which was very much just ongoing. And then even that last bit at the end there, this is just in the last month, really, not even. Italy floods, Canada wildfires, Greece wildfires, China flooding, which is ongoing, and our response to there we'll get to in a second. And the Hawaii wildfires, which happened today. So it's really talking about catastrophic flooding. It's just, and this is just 8 months, like it's just insane.
So I'll just run through really quickly, again, kind of thinking about the role of wildlife and disasters and how you might be interacting. So there was Typhoon not sure how to say that, Doksuri, I'll go with. And it brought extensive rainfall in Beijing and the surrounding areas. And it was record level flooding, which we continue to hear that term, record level. And it's, a bit overwhelming at times. So we have a raptor center that we support there, the Beijing Raptor Center. And they were obviously affected by this flooding. So we reached out to our coworkers there and said, well, how are you guys doing? So first they said, well, we have 79 birds in care. We're supposed to release nearly half of them in about a week's time. Release site? Not an option right now. Now we have to wait for the flooding to recede and to see what the conditions look like. So now we're going to have to hold on to these birds a little bit longer. Luckily, the birds at their facility, as you see our friend in the top corner, they have cameras on the birds that are outside. He didn't care. He didn't care about that rain, so he was very happy. The center itself, they have an area in their clinic that I guess has flooded in the past, and they wanted to fix it, but COVID happened. And so here they are still unable to fix this. So they got out what I know we all have, duct tape. And they duct taped and duct taped and duct taped this clinic to make sure it didn't get wet. And you know what? It held up. It survived, which is amazing. So the center was in good shape, so that was really good. But now they're getting calls for intake. People are rescuing the young birds that are affected by the flooding and asking their teams to come out and get them. Well, transport is a bit difficult right now because you can't get to these areas. Oh, and by the way, some of their staff live a little bit further outside and they can't even get out of their own community. So they're short-staffed. They're getting more birds in each day than they would typically get. And they have extra birds that they can't even release. So, now we're moving to a different level and really looking at, it a bit more holistically. And this is probably what is going to happen to you. It's not going to be just you as a shelter. You are going to be a community resource, and, people are going to be reaching out to you for help. So John Smith, now his moment to shine. He is going to tell us about his community, Geraldton, and we'll learn a little bit more about community planning.
So this is an excellent DVD from, it's actually not officially a training DVD from the city of Greater Geraldton, and this is Managing Animals in Disasters. And while we're playing it, just going to play a couple of minutes snippets that we'll cut through as well. Just want you to have a think in the back of your mind what might be missing in this video.
Bandi Mara means good hands or safe hands, and in regards to animal welfare, they are always in good hands with their pet owners. And in case of an emergency, when you need to leave home, you can take the animals to be in safe hands.
On Saturday the 6th of June 2015, the City of Greater Geraldton conducted an emergency exercise, Operation Bandi Mara. The aim of the exercise was to test the response to the activation of an emergency welfare centre and the City of Greater Geraldton Local Animal Emergency Welfare Guidelines 2015. The purpose of a field exercise is to ensure that all agencies are familiar with the geography of the local area surrounds, facilities and procedures during an emergency response situation. A field exercise also allows response teams the chance to experience real conditions where participants can put their training to the test. This DVD...
All right, we're just going to skip forward a little
Fortunately, the pre-planning for the exercise paid off.
The exercise commences with a briefing whereby all agencies, staff, volunteers are briefed about safety, the scenario, the parameters and objectives. This exercise had various areas of operation including the animal registration area, the animal triage area, the dog facility, cat facility and livestock area, the welfare centre, which included a registration area, kitchen operations and emergency accommodation. The date is Saturday the 10th of January 2016 and a fire that commenced the previous day in the Shire of Chapman Valley has jumped containment lines and is spreading fast towards the areas of Wadrakine, Moresby and Woori. The incident controller has activated the Department for Child Protection and Family Support to set up welfare centres.
It's been activated by DFIS in regards to a fire that's approaching the outskirts of Geelong and they're evacuating people.
The affected community is now arriving at the welfare centre.
Maybe I'll just hold on to you, it's going to be great.
The Department for Child Protection and Family Support is now working with the Red Cross to register people. It is not long before people start turning up to the centre with animals.
Your chappie, what's his name?
Unfortunately, we have to keep him isolated.
So when did he last vomit? See when that happened?
Maybe okay.
Look after me, dog. Please. Alright. I'm burnt on the arm and the leg, mate.
All right, so we'll stop it there. That's a great video, but pretty obvious question. What's missing out of that video? Well done. All right, so we'll continue on. Answer is wildlife, correct. So how can we as a wildlife rehab community, screen. How's that? How can we as a wildlife rehab community adapt some of what we just saw? Do we have any chance of replicating that? So that was a pretty good video. Great training exercise, official video that went through the full steps of it. Very impressive, but it's clear that wildlife is not written into their local emergency management plans, at least not into their training exercises. So I guess I would question if there are groups in the community here. Do we have the resources to undertake an exercise like that? Do we have the time to undertake an exercise like that? If we are working in regions where there are multiple wildlife organizations in one region, who's going to take the lead? It's probably a very big question. So how do we respond as an entire community and not just our own groups? How do we take off our badges of our own wildlife groups and respond to an event? If we're talking about catastrophic planning, how do we do it as a community rather than individual groups trying to collaborate together? After a conversation with Jen, I loved this phrase that Jen passed on to me this morning. Probably during a disaster event or an emergency, we know there's a lot of groups that don't really get along, but we want to stress that during an emergency, you don't need to collaborate, you just need to cooperate. And that comes with good communication, transparent communication, and we'd really like to stress that for the benefit of the animals. So we will move on. We're going to use John Smith again. We've actually mapped a lot of that as a bit of a visual representation of what we are looking into. We'll come up in a second, hopefully. There we are. Geraldton, and this might be familiar for some of those in the audience. Geraldton Wildlife Rescue. It's not on Google. Need to fix that. So this is using exactly what was in the video. I've also tapped into the Geraldton local emergency management plans. We can have a bit of a visual representation of what's actually going on here. So in the video, they mentioned Wagrakine and other areas that were facing bushfire. And we would say, what areas are going to be affected and where can we take animals? So according to the local emergency management plans, if you are evacuating, these are your post-event shelters in purple. And so you can take animals to here, if you can see that. Geraldton Camp School. You can take companion animals, Towns Football Club, or yourselves, you humans. John Batten Community Hall. So these are all very real examples. This is what the government has actually listed as where you can go. Now, if we want to overlay some of the veterinary support, you can see, right, there's 3 vet clinics. They seem to be intact, operating, not impacted by the fire. Wonderful. So I want you to start thinking, if you're a wildlife carer and this is your region, what are some of these resources that you might be able to tap into? What are some of the questions that you can be asking of your local council to say, all right, Geraldton, I have a lot of wildlife in care. I'm going to be impacted by the animals. You have listed out these evacuation or post-event shelters for humans, some for animals. Can we have a conversation of where does wildlife fit into this? Across Australia, there's going to be issues of legislation taking animals, particularly wildlife, into human areas, but they have already mentioned isolation areas. And so it's worth having the conversation. If we zoom out a little bit, we ask, what are the wildlife shelters? And so according to the Geraldton local emergency management plans, they've actually listed 2 wildlife areas where you can take wildlife. It's not part of their training, but it's listed formally in their planning. And so you have Just Raptors, which I assume is just raptors. And you have Greenup Wildlife Park, which is a little bit out of town. That's not a lot for Geraldton Wildlife Rescue. So they're gonna have to rely very much on their own networks. So if we, from a quick Google search, look at who's around, we can see that we have 6 wildlife carers in the area, possibly not all from Geraldton Wildlife Rescue. And I would love to ask the question, how many of these rescuers are talking to each other? How many of these rescuers know each other? How many could be relied on in an emergency to say, I'm evacuating from this fire, I have no resources around, can I please take these animals to you? And so some of you may be in the audience here today, or online with us. We have GG's Wildlife Rescue, City of Greater Geraldton, the Rangers will do some of the wildlife rescuing work. El Benyo, which I believe is a camping ground that's taking in some sanctuary animals, and Kalwari Wildlife Rescue. So not a lot going on for John Smith of Geraldton Wildlife Rescue. It is going to be very difficult. So if you guys want to shout out, what are some other obvious gaps? Or if you put yourself in John Smith's shoes, any suggestions what you might be able to do in this situation? Or if this is in your community, any suggestions on how do you get around if you're living in a regional town? And we'll show you a bit of a different map shortly. What are some assets that you might be able to tap into? Anyone brave enough? Facebook. Yep. Perfect. There you go. And so what we're going to move on to after this is talking about how do we, as a community, work with the local emergency management officials? How do we make that part of the plans where the emergency officials can get you past roadblocks to go with a supervised team to go rescue these animals or to evacuate? What if they are taken out? So it's about asking these questions of how do you make this formalized? How do you make this professional approach when it comes to wildlife? Why are we still at the bottom and the last thought about when it comes to an emergency? So having these conversations, saying to your local council or emergency services to say, we have a Facebook group that's transporting animals in an emergency. How do we get on your comms? How do we get as part of your plans? And just opening up that conversation. Often you... Wonderful. That's perfect. And I know that WA Wildlife also have transporters, and it's great. And I think it should be in a lot of states as well. But that also requires assets, and it requires people to be in that area. And so when we're talking about Western Australia, which is a very, very large area, it's going to be very difficult to find drivers to transport all the way up. And I'm sure there's going to be a great network as well. But I think it's something that we should be asking the questions of how do we formalize this approach? How do we get those names out there so it can be something that is in all states? Because it sounds like it's a wonderful resource as well. And so I wanted to expand out a little bit and show a bit of the demographics of what we have in this room. And so this is going to be a bit of a visual representation of the survey, the anonymous survey that you showed in this room. And again, this might cause some controversy, but if I tick this box, this should show roughly 200 people submitted your answers. And this is where you're coming from here. So again, the folks in Alice, the folks in Cooper Pedy, going to face a lot of challenges. And we can take some of these examples, like we can go up to Central Queensland and zoom in a little bit and say, right, those in Gladstone, are you talking to each other? Are you talking to the ones near Bundaberg? Probably not. But if they are from different organizations, who are the people that you can tap on the shoulder and that you can rely on when you need? And it's about that mutual aid, so that if it's not you this time, it might be you next time. So if you're going to help them this time, they may be in a position to help you next time. Is there anything to add? And so I wanted to share a bit of a real life example. So IFAW is helping with the Northern Rivers region in New South Wales. So they've taken it a step further and not just say, right, this is a community resource. They've actually formed a network. And many of you will be in the audience here in person or online with us today. And next week, in fact, Jen and I are facilitating their first scenario-based in-person training or workshop. And so this is a network covering 8 LGAs. We heard yesterday that in the state of Western Australia, you guys have 2 wildlife hospitals. Within 8 LGAs, there's 2 about to be 3 wildlife hospitals. So this is a different ballgame, very different ballgame. You have about 4 or 5 wildlife organizations that are all operating in the same space. And so the question is, how do we take a community approach to this? How do we take off the individual badges, and how do we work together for the benefit of the animals? So again, we can flick to the other map, and this is very much randomized data. I'm not showing actual data, but this is what something could look like in the area that we are working. So we have the various groups. You can see there are 6 groups there, 2 different WIRES groups, Tweed Valley Wildlife Carers, Northern Rivers Wildlife Carers, and Friends of the Koala, and I've missed out Byron Bay Wildlife Hospital, sorry. I don't know why. But that is in there, and that is just by the personnel. So if you look at all these dots, these are the vets, vet nurses, rescuers, and carers just in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. There's a lot of resources there to tap into. Something else that we can then look into are the equipment. And so we start looking at what do all of these 7 organizations offer as equipment. So you have your koala specific enclosures, flying fox pre-release areas, your bird aviaries, you've got raptors, you've even got, where is the eucalypt plantation to collect browse from. You can go as far as other to then say, okay, that's a bad example, sorry. We click here. We have a triage trailer over here. Where are the vehicles? Where are the generators? Who can you tap into in an emergency? Who can you tap on the shoulder and say, I'm evacuating, can I bring animals to you? Or I need some extra assistance, can you come to me? So it's all about this regional or community-based approach of, sure, you don't need to collaborate, but you need to cooperate for the benefit of the animals. And so this is a very real life example, using fake data here, obviously for privacy issues, but what it can look like. And so we are running our scenario in a couple of weeks where we will put them to the test to see what that looks like, which will be very fun. And if I go to what the data table looks like, it doesn't have to be this formal. So this is assets and equipment, vehicles, enclosures, trailers, whatever it may be. Having total and available capacity is very important because it shows that, sure, you might have space to hold 24 koalas, but at any given one moment, you will have koalas in that cage. So what is the available capacity? So in this case, there are animals taking up, so they have 12. And we're trying to figure out the best way to update this information to make it live. You'll see in column H, here there is a WERT column in New South Wales. This is the Wildlife Emergency Response Team. And so this brings me to my next point, is that it's not just for your own community's sake, it is for the government's sake. And so this is an asset list that can really be handed over to the government to say, we have X amount of veterinary surgeons, X amount of veterinary nurses or rescuers and carers. If it is a level 2 or 3 incident, please coordinate us. We don't want to be doing this alone. You guys are the experts in coordinating an event. You've activated, here is what we have in an area. And we've seen far too often, I bring up this, sorry. We've seen far too often in emergencies that the gathering of data, the planning and intelligence takes too long before boots are on the ground. We saw results from Kath's amazing research before that timely access to animals is absolutely vital. So if the government, under planning and intelligence, and this is a real life example of what an AIM structure would look like, the emergency response structure, if the government knows what wildlife assets are in an area, you're doing the job for them. You're saying, here's what we have, coordinate us, which means that your operations in the middle can immediately have boots on the ground and follow what processes they have in place. And so this is something that we are working on. We would be happy to facilitate it in your region. So it's not just for your own activations in a community, it is helping the government. If they do want to activate, they know exactly what is there and help save that time. And so we'd be very happy to continue these conversations. But I think this session is going to be a bit more of a quicker one. So that was mostly the end, just discussing. We want you to take your badges off, cooperate, it's the key phrase here, form networks of those who can help you in a crisis and who you can help as well. Practice for your plans. And before I finish up, I just wanted to give a quick plug. At IFAW, we have a smartphone app, the IFAW Wildlife Rescue app. It is rolling out nationally. It's been in several states on the east side already. We have launched it in WA. Of course, there is a WA Wild Care helpline, and that will be available everywhere. So if you come across an injured animal, you open up the smartphone app and it will tell you who your nearest rescuer or organization is. And we would really like for any groups that are not already on it to please contact us. I'll have my email up on the next slide. You can take a photo of it and contact me. And again, WA will be a different story because we have the Wild Care helpline. But for the other states, if you're not already on the app, please let us know. And we all know that, again, timely access is not just in a disaster, day to day. If someone, it's for the general public. So if they come across an injured animal, they can open up the app and get your contact details as soon as possible if you are the nearest rescuer. But for now, that's us. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Right, we're well ahead of schedule at the moment. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to put to these two experts? I know there are organisations that are getting together with planning for emergency responses. And I know some of us are already aware of the AIM structure and have been involved with these or other organisations within our lives. in other areas. So gather as much experience as you can, when you can, in a quiet time, so you understand what you're doing and you don't panic in an emergency. So are there any questions from the floor that you would like to bring to here? So, okay, so, all right, one over there to start with. And, okay. So would you like to start? Are you able to, hang on, let me just, oh yeah, okay, that one works. Yeah, good.
Yeah, Terry Brenner, of course, from Cooperpedy. One thing you sort of missed in your disaster planning or evacuation planning is in our situation, we're like bloody Fort Knox. You can't get into our place. It's very high fencing, and we're very aware of people. We have a lot of tourists come through our area, and they just wander wherever they feel like wandering. They open gates and don't shut them. Go where, even if you have a sign up, private property, keep out, they still wander. They wander, because a lot of people live underground, a lot of people wander over the roof of houses and drop stuff down their air shafts, so nothing to have rocks falling down inside your house from some bloody mongrel kid up there. So I think it's really important. I'm sure there's lots of people here that have similar sort of tight security for the animals' welfare. I think it's really important to have a access in from outside. So, you know, rather than having that sort of Fort Knox sort of situation where there is maybe a lockbox outside, because if you fall down and hurt your leg or whatever and you can't open the door for emergency services or whatever, I think that's really, really important. And I think that's something you've missed in your planning, guys. Sorry about that. But,
I absolutely agree with that. We'll have this. Yes, absolutely agree with that, and thank you so much. We're here to learn from you guys as much as you guys are here to learn from us, so we welcome all the suggestions and things we have missed, and we can absolutely update the template, so thank you so much for that.
And I can also say,
round of applause, come on.
And I know that I have seen in other disasters where people call in and say, please come rescue my animals, because maybe they were at work or they were at the store and now they can't get past the roadblock back to their house. A lot of people do say like something like that, you know, oh, actually I have a key, I hide it in this place, you know, and they give that permission. But it is, you know, the permission part is something you want to think about. And what you have set up, you know, how difficult will it be for somebody to get your animals out if that's the case?
Just a quick question. I know that in New South Wales, the government set up a wildlife emergency response task force, and there's a structure around that with training and AIM system and all the rest of it. And it'll be different for every state. But I was thinking during a bushfire, it's really hard to know where the resources are, and in a big bushfire and sort of in different parts of the country, it might be an interesting concept for IFAW to have like an app for wildlife groups, so that, you know, people can communicate and know where help can be with their different disaster plans and where they might get help or where the vets might be, just not for the public, but obviously working in with that AIM structure, but knowing where the evacuation is or where the help might be, or be able to contact and, you know, move between disaster plans, or somehow for that to be understood by other groups and getting their badges off and working in with each other. Something, just that access, that's Facebook. It was really hard to know where you could get help in a bushfire for just some responses. It's probably better now.
Thanks for that, Ellie. I think it's it comes with the issues of groups not wanting to talk to each other, and so I think, again, pushing that point of cooperation. You don't need to sign MOUs, you don't need to take them out for drinks. Just say, in an emergency, what are you doing and what are we doing? And have that conversation before the emergency. And we're seeing that start, especially in New South Wales. People are starting to take off their badges and say, okay, I'm going to help because I know that if I need help, we can rely on you to help me. The idea of the Facebook group that we heard earlier might be a good start for that. Apps are really difficult and expensive. But I would suggest reaching out, forming that community approach to the wildlife for the better outcomes. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, the other part that I thought was interesting about what you said is that, different states can be affected. And, when Rob was talking about Mexico and the volcano there, it was a really complicated disaster because whoever drew the state lines thought it was a really good idea to put the volcano in the middle of 3 different states. And so therefore it became, 3 times more complicated because now we have state lines. So I think the idea of having scenarios and finding out like what is the best way to store that information, like, I was talking to Rob this morning about the spreadsheet, and I'm a little bit, anxious when I see spreadsheets because it's not something that I am really comfortable with. But it's like, well, how do we fill that out? Well, actually, the survey that you guys did, the form, just typing in that is able to export to a spreadsheet. And so, one of the things we'd like to do is try to make it as least complicated for you all in case you have spreadsheet fear. But like maybe we need to look at a way to organize the data so that way it's useful and it's, not too expensive. But, I think doing a scenario and looking at some options would be really cool to do and have you all drive, what fits best, what works best for you, how can we do this? But we need to get the conversation going and try a practice round and then we'd be able to review that, make changes, and try it again in the future.
Okay, thank you. There was a question somewhere over here. What's that? Oh.
I spoke to Rob a bit earlier. Haven't been involved in the Black Southern and Black Saturday fires as a volunteer and also as a shelter. It kind of made me think about, I take animals in there, actually my responsibility if something went pear-shaped to get them out. I live in a high bushfire zone. I know there's only one road in and out. I know it's a congested road, and I know that if I've got a code red day, I'm not having volunteers at my shelter. I'm not going to be responsible for extra people as well as the animals to get out. That kind of made me do a bit of a thing. I know what animals I generally have in. I am a relatively small shelter. I have about 14 at a time. How do I get them out? Kind of led me to talking to my local trailer suppliers. Went to them and went, hey, listen, I run a wildlife shelter. I'm in the Mount Dandenongs. Predictions are we're going to burn sometime in the next 5 years. I've got these animals. I really want to be able to get them out. How can we help? With that, they donated me a cage trailer. You just have to ask. Pretty photos makes what happens.
So I think wildlife people are very resourceful. We need to talk to each other a lot more than we do.
Yes.
Simone, did you want to mention something?
And one of the things that also needs to be happening that is the other end of this problem is how we get top-down engagement with wildlife in emergencies. And just to make you aware of a couple of things that are going on in that space, because the bushfires were very instrumental in waking national and state governments up to the need to do more in this space, but those wheels turn super slowly. So it's really good to continue this impetus from the other end of the problem. So you need both. But the National Emergency Management Agency is an agency that deals with these whole nuts and bolts questions at the national level. And part of that is the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience. And if any of you have been to the AIDR website, and if you haven't, you should go have a look, because there's lots of handbooks there on preparedness and planning and all of those sorts of things. We tend to go straight to response when we talk about emergencies, because that's what we do, what rehabilitators do, we rescue. But across the board, across all emergencies, across all hazards, the bang for your buck is in prevention and planning. But that's boring. It takes a lot of work. It's hard, and it's not sexy. And so it's hard to get the impetus to do that. But at the AIDR, that's kind of what their remit is. And so they're doing that. And one of the things that they're working on at the moment, they have a bunch of handbooks, and they're working on a handbook for management of animals in emergencies and how animals fit into emergencies. I'm part of that writing group along with a bunch of other people. It has stalled, and one of the things that's stalling on, or one of the questions that still remains to be asked, is will the remit of that handbook include wildlife? So we're working really hard to try and keep wildlife in the picture. I see why they don't want to. Wildlife is tough and it's hard and it's messy and la. And I actually think that regardless of whether wildlife ends up explicitly in that handbook or not, it will be a very useful resource for us, because we know that the issues are very similar. We're custodians of these wildlife in the same way as people who own pets are, so many of the same principles apply. So that's going on, and there is increasing understanding at that national level that of the concept of one welfare, that if you look after pets and animals that people are custodians of, you will also look after the safety of people. And that's getting increasingly recognised at that level, which is great. And so if we can continue to build on that by saying, we're here to help make people safer, and what we do is one of the things that will make people safer, then it's a good way to think about framing things when you're approaching, you know, the jurisdictional authorities and the incident managers.
Thank you, Simone, for bringing us up to date a bit more with that. The other thing that we also need to be aware of is people want action right now. People want to deliver things right now. But you can't always do that. It takes time. Sometimes it's generations that actually have to gradually change. You can only go as fast as the slowest person. Now, if you say, okay, let's get this going, let's do it, you leave behind a whole cohort of people who have valuable input as well. You've got to listen to everybody, you've got to collate it, then you have to present it. So you've got different government levels, you've got your own organisation, so you've got to start from the ground up. It is a very hard thing to do. It does take time. And you've only got to look over, well, even my time that's been involved with wildlife, how things have changed. And it does take time. Not as fast as some people want, but it does get there. And we're getting there. So you use your quiet times to build on that. And when we have the expertise of IFAW and very many other organisations, what's in this room would be how many hundreds of thousands of years of experience and knowledge if we added all together. We have got a huge amount of a resource here that we can build on. So this is what we need to do. So anyway, I'd like to thank our brilliant people here who travel the world, because it's not just an isolated thing in Western Australia. We are interconnected by very many different nationalities who are representative here. We have visitors from overseas, people linking in from our Zooms as well. And we are all interconnected with the land we live in, the land we share, and how we work with each other and how we look after each other for our emergencies and how we plan. So I'd like to say thank you very much to both of you. And I have a little gift for you both. To say thank you. And whoops. If you have any questions, I'm sure they are very willing to share their knowledge with them. And we would like to say thank you very much. So a big round of applause for both our presenters. I think that means you all.